Hi, my name is MK1 Jeffrey Redmond. I'm with the Engineering Systems School Fast Response Cutter staff at Training Center Yorktown. This is part 2 of a 3-part series. This video will cover the disassembly and reassembly of the MTU-20V 4000 M93L turbocharger. The MPC that coincides with this task is Alpha 51001.D. This video is for familiarization with the task and shall not take the place of official procedures promulgated by a Patrol Board product line. Ensure you follow all safety guidelines outlined in the maintenance procedure card. Now let's cover the tools you'll need. Tools you'll need will be the general purpose toolkit and universal toolkit seen in previous video, as well as a metric dial indicator, a set of metric wire feeler gauges, and compressor wheel cover. We have removed the turbocharger, so let's get started with disassembly.
Now that we've got the turbocharger in a safe working area, remove the exhaust lagging from the exhaust elbow. As we get ready to remove the exhaust elbow and spacer and carrier housings, make sure you mark the position of all these components so that you can clock them correctly for reassembly. A prick punch works well for this because it can't be washed off. We're now going to remove the actuator assembly and the linkage for the exhaust flap itself. Support the turbocharger with wood blocking and position it with the compressor side down and the exhaust side up. Then remove the exhaust elbow to carrier housing exhaust adapter and the bolts that attach the two carrier housings together. Once the bolts are removed, remove the outside carrier housing. Then remove the nuts and washers from the carrier housing and turbine housing. Gently pry up on the studs and remove the turbine housing. Place the protective cover over the turbine wheel and then remove the inside carrier housing. The new turbocharger assembly will come, as seen in this picture, with the turbine housing held off the cartridge with spacers. The carrier housings are not part of a turbocharger assembly. You'll need to remove the turbine housing and spacers prior to assembly of the turbocharger. Apply a thin amount of Elastoseal sealant to the flange on the exhaust side of the turbocharger cartridge. Ensure you don't get a bunch of it in the recess for the O-ring. Lubricate the new O-rings with hockey form and place on the turbocharger cartridge. Take the inside carrier housing that's cleaned and ready to go and place it onto the new turbocharger cartridge, making sure it's clocked exactly as the old one came off. Do the same with the turbine housing. Install the washers and nuts for the inside carrier housing and tighten to specified torque. The lock nuts and washers for the turbine housing must go on in a specific sequence. See the MPC for that proper sequence. It is important to refer to the current maintenance procedure card or technical publication for tightening specifications and tolerances. These change from time to time by the manufacturer or other authority. Install the washers and lock nuts for the turbine housing studs and tighten to specified torque. Measure the turbine housing to turbine wheel clearance per MPC. Apply a thin amount of Elastoseal sealant on the inside carrier housing to prepare it for installing the outside carrier housing. Install new restrictors in correct location per MPC. Install the outside carrier housing. Align it roughly and insert the connecting bolts hand tight. Then, using a straight edge, make sure the housings are exactly flush and tighten to specified torque. Measure the clearance between the compressor wheel and the compressor housing per MPC. Measure the thrust clearance per MPC. Make sure your dial indicator is set up correctly, or your reading will not be valid. Install the turbocharger to exhaust elbow adapter. It must be clocked correctly as it was prior to disassembly. Tighten the adapter bolts to specified torque. Apply Elastoseal sealant to the flap shaft housing and linkage assembly. Insert the exhaust flap shaft with pin aligned as it was prior to disassembly. It is important to insert the one carrier housing attaching bolt that goes under the exhaust flap shaft housing prior to installing the housing. Install the exhaust flap shaft housing assembly aligned as it was prior to disassembly. Tighten bolts to specified torque. Install the exhaust elbow, ensuring the marks, as noted during disassembly, are all aligned properly, and tighten bolts to specified torque. Install the exhaust flap actuator and brackets if applicable. Tighten bolts to specified torque. Install the exhaust elbow lagging and shield assembly. This process can be a little bit tricky, and sometimes the thread inserts can become damaged. Inspect them carefully prior to assembly. Install the pin and clip to tie the exhaust flap actuator to the linkage.